Welcome to the Pointy End. I'm Keith Sutherland. Today my guest is Wayne Gregson, standing as a candidate for Whipstick Ward, the City of Greater Bendigo election. So welcome, Wayne.
Thanks, Keith. Great to be here.
Now, you're glutton for punishment. You're a councillor in 2004, 2008. Why did you want to throw your hat in the ring this time around? And I know you were very passionate and controversial at the time, but a very good councillor. Why do you want to do it 8 years later?
I loved it in that 2004-2008 term, and I really felt like I was coming to terms with the whole responsibilities of being a councillor when I was hit over the back of the head by the baseball bat of democracy, shall we say.
That's what happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I haven't been able to legally stand up until now because I work for Damien Drum in a state government capacity. And if you work for a state MP in this state, you're not allowed to stand for council. So now I don't work for Drummies, so I can stand for council again.
Okay. Overnight and this morning on Facebook, I just noticed that there's some stuff really happening, and your comments were that candidates forming a secret alliance. Now, I know where you're coming from, but just explain what you're talking about there.
Well, in this version of democracy, which we have in local government, where here we have the 3-member wards, there's a preferential system of voting where you can get people passing their preferences around who they want to get in or don't want to get in. There's 2 ways to do that. You can do it openly, which in Whipstick Ward there is one open and honourable ticket going on.
Team Whipstick, yes.
Yeah, and then there's another way you can do it. Just don't talk about this sort of stuff and have your preferences deals privately. There's been a lot of talk around Bendigo about the people who are involved in the anti-mosque thing, forming some sort of effort to get into council to raise the issue yet again, which you're going to wonder why that is. That's done and dusted as far as I'm concerned. It should always have been. But our preferential system allows that to happen, I think. And I think we need to reform that before we have another election in Bendigo, not only at local government level, but in the Senate, where, for example, as you know, you can get people with only a few dozen votes getting in there and representing their entire state.
Yeah. And out of that, I don't know where you were talking about, that Andrea Metcalf, Stuart Symes, you came in 7th, and I noticed the current councillor, James Williams, last on that survey. Then converse to that was the tourism sustainability survey that was done. We all submitted information. You came in 4th, and James Williams was 1st, so he goes from 1st to last on the 2 different surveys. So therein lies the problem, and that's very confusing for the public out there.
The only worth of those sorts of things, though, Keith, is if voters take the time to actually consume that information and use that to make a valued, balanced judgment. One of them on its own is going to give you a perverted view. You take that all into account, and it might give you some idea of where people really do genuinely stand.
You and I spoke yesterday on another forum, and you mentioned to me yesterday that better decision making that's why you're putting yourself up. You think you've got a fair bit to do, as you said before, probably some unfinished business. Does that mean there were some bad decisions made back in that period of time when you may have been in local government as a councillor?
Yes, there was back then, and I would be the first to admit that I was, as a newbie at that stage, was probably part of that process as well. It certainly happened in subsequent council terms where a lot of the governance issues have fallen apart, and a lot of this decision making has been either too drawn out so that it causes difficulties and costs, or else just the wrong decisions are made and then remade and made again. You asked me yesterday, and I'll raise this before you do, the one which I think that we most got wrong last time, but with the most noblest of reasons, was the MEL. I still think that where we went wrong there was our governance wasn't, we should have established clear design principles and stuck to it. In the end, we were so busy trying to be consultative and compliant to every little lobby group that wanted this in, that out, this in, that out, that the whole design concept was compromised, and instead of finishing up with a horse, we finished up with a camel. The trouble with that is that people tend not to remember all the good stuff that still comes from that. Most of the money of the MEL, for example, went underground into making it a very high-tech space, but also preserving the shops on the western side of the MEL from the regular flooding that they used to get. And as you know, we've had record September rains and there's been no flooding, so I'd say that was a pretty good investment.
Yep. 2 other things that you mentioned yesterday that we're really passionate about was one that you're big on the arts and culture, and you'll explain that, I know, in a moment. And the other one was about Bendigo being the city in the forest. And you're getting really annoyed and disappointed with people dumping in the forest and all the things that are going on, living close to it, as you mentioned. They're two passions of yours, and just if that's going to be part of your policy platform heading into this election, is it?
It will be. On the cultural side of things, a lot of people work very hard now for maybe 3 or 4 decades to build this city's cultural credentials at a national and even an international standard, with the art gallery now being recognised in world circles for the work that Karen Quinlan does there. And the Alhambra Theatre, I think, is something that, well, the reason I first stood for council in 2004 was to get a 1,000-seat auditorium for Bendigo. I wasn't successful at that time, but it's since happened anyway, which is great. But that reputation can be so easily damaged, and we now have other regional capitals looking at what we've done, realising the economic and the livability worth that's in this, and are now trying to emulate what we've done. Shepparton, for example, I know very well, is looking at Bendigo, trying to work out how to build that cultural credibility.
Just on that point, I know you'll go to the forest next, but it's been interesting having done and been involved in a lot of interviews where there is a lot of criticism coming, because one of the people that was standing yesterday mentioned that he's going to be a voice for the people that don't have a voice out there, and that a lot of these people don't go to the art gallery, they don't go to the arts events, but they sort of lose, and there's a lot of money, it should break even, but they forget, and you mentioned a figure yesterday, way back when they did a survey, it was about $20 million to this community.
Just for the art gallery.
Then.
Yeah,
that's right. That was back then. What it's worth now, but there still seems to be a platform out there for those people that are anti the arts.
I think it's nonsense to say that people don't value the arts or they don't attend cultural events. I mean, that's almost numerical nonsense. I can't now remember how many people went to the Maryland exhibition, but I know it was a huge
150-something thousand or 137,000, one or the other.
And how many of them do you reckon might have left a couple of $100 in a till on the way out? I mean, to say that it doesn't bring wealth and prosperity to the city is just nonsense. I often think that it's wrong to pit sport against culture, for example. I think that they are somewhat linked. But the argument always comes, but you should be putting more money into the QEO rather than the Alhambra Theatre or the Capitol Theatre. And I think you put money into everything that works and brings you health, wealth and happiness, I think.
And as a multiplier of 2.25 times the
right.
dollars that come to town. Now tell me about your passion about the forest.
Yeah, over the past 15 years or so, I've developed a strong interest in mountain bike riding and other stuff as well. But I spent a lot of time riding around the forest around Bendigo and really know what they are. Now, in the term of council that I did last time, we established that whole idea of Bendigo being a city in the forest, and that was about that stage where the Bendigo National Park was declared. And they developed all these riding trails, like I think it's the Echidna Trail, Blue Echidna Trail is one that goes around, and we've done most of those. But in recent years, the degradation of the bushland around Bendigo has been horrific. We often take part in Clean Up Australia Day, and there was one year where we took a couple of big tandem trailers out into the bush near the airport and just about filled them with beer bottles and other junk and various other unmentionables like old undies and stuff out in the bush. And what's the story there? Anyway, but I think that we need to work out some way to control that and to monitor that much more closely than we do. But we need to look internally as well. We need to look at the forests in the city as well as the city in the forest. Where I live now, we're in the heart of the California Gully Bushland Reserve. Now, in the 2 years that I've lived there, I've watched the forest gradually get nibbled away by a number of things. Illegal dumping, illegal off-road kids on off-road motorcycles, guys mud bashing their four-wheel drives through there in the dead of night. We found one guy one night next morning bogged up to almost his door handles in there. But you can't walk through that anymore because now it's like the Somme. I mean, our two little corgis just disappear into these mud ruts and you see the tail walking through. I reckon in the years that I've lived there, the area in my immediate neighbourhood, the bushland has been reduced by maybe up to 2 hectares.
Wow.
So we need to work out how to work with Parks Victoria and motivated communities to actually protect and preserve and enhance these spaces. We were successful once in having Hustlers Reserve declared as a bushland reserve, and a very, very motivated community there has now turned that into one of the most pretty pieces of urban bushland you'd ever see.
Okay. We mentioned before about the team Whipstick, where they're going to preference each other, and to get elected these days, you've really got to have some preferencing going for you. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult to stand alone. Other than if you're probably
it's been nice enough. I'm out then. That's it.
Other than if you're Councillor Rod Fife, who probably has that following and is always going to get elected. But have you got any people that you're sort of talking to with preferencing? Because, as I said, there's Team Whipstick, we know where their votes are going. There was the other people you've mentioned about the voting and sort of the anti-Moss type people. Is there a group or people you've talked to that you're hoping to get preferences from? Because it is pretty important.
Frankly, no, that may be naive and maybe it'll cost me in the long run, but I don't want to play that game anymore. People kept saying to me, but who should we vote for? How will we know who are the people that you think would make good councillors? And I've chosen to do it this way. I've now met all the candidates, and I've put up online my idea of who I'd be happy to share a table with, but there's no preference deals, no.
Okay. Finally, you've been a councillor before. Are you a little concerned that in the last 18 months we've seen all 5 directors leave for various reasons? Is that concerning to you?
It is. It's one of the most significant brain drains I've ever seen in Bendigo's time. Because of my work in government before and also in newspapers before, you work very closely with the directors and you know how hard most of them have worked over the years. In that one term I spent with them, I mean, I was astonished when I found out how much effort they were putting into making Bendigo great. Poor old Craig Neiman, the CEO, has lost virtually his entire team over the last 18 months. Yeah. And I don't know how he's managing to keep reinventing people and trying to work out different combinations, but that's, I think, one of the worst consequences of the disharmony that's gone on in that same time. I had spoken with some of those outgoing directors in another role, and they were just about pulling their hair out in despair, just trying to get on with their job within the city all this time. Craig's done a great job of keeping a lid on it as much as he can, but in the end it's had its natural toll. Don't hold me to this, but I don't think there's a single one left there now who was a director when I was there. No. And I mean, you look at people like Stanley Akos, you look at people like Margot, and you look at people like Jan Boynton, I mean, and Prue Mansfield. These were all people of worth and substance who were well regarded in their industry at a statewide and sometimes even at a national level, and were awarded at a national level too for their work, and we no longer have them.
Well, Wayne, thank you so much for appearing on the Pointy End. I wish you well. It'll be an interesting campaign, and I know that the ballot papers are going out yesterday, today and tomorrow. So on the 21st, from then on, once the votes start to be counted, it'll be an interesting situation to see what the new council holds, because there's 2 obviously vacancies, and I dare say there's probably going to be a groundswell of change this time around, but it'll be interesting to see where we're at.
It's just interesting, isn't it? That Chinese curse comes to mind, may you live in interesting times.
You certainly do.
So thanks Wayne, for that. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.